Dr. Hannah Kim pushed through the heavy wooden doors of Millfield County Courthouse, her boots leaving small clumps of red dirt on the polished marble floor. The security guard at the entrance wrinkled his nose as she walked past, her khaki field jacket still damp from the morning's excavation work. Several people in the waiting area turned to stare, whispering among themselves about the disheveled woman who clearly didn't belong in their pristine courthouse. Hannah had been working in the desert terrain outside town for 3 weeks now, setting up sophisticated monitoring equipment that most locals mistook for random scientific gadgets. Her National Geographic credentials meant nothing to the small-town residents who saw her as just another outsider, disturbing their quiet community. What they didn't know was that her equipment had been picking up unusual electromagnetic signatures from deep space, signals that suggested Earth was being watched. Case number 47B, trespassing violation, Hannah Kim, the bailiff called out in a bored voice. Hannah stood and walked to the defendant's table, noticing how Judge Lee continued shuffling through paperwork without even acknowledging her presence. His grey hair was perfectly combed, his black robes freshly pressed, and his expression carried the weight of someone who had already made up his mind before hearing a single word. "Ms. Kim," Judge Lee finally said, still not looking up from his papers. "This is your third citation this month. First it was the Morrison Ranch, then the old quarry site, and now the wasteland behind the water treatment plant. I don't care what excuse you have this time." Hannah cleared her throat, trying to maintain her professional composure despite the dismissive tone. "Your Honor, I'm a National Geographic researcher studying geological formations and electromagnetic anomalies in this region. I have proper documentation and—" "Enough!" Judge Lee interrupted sharply, finally raising his eyes to look at her with obvious irritation. "I've heard this story twice already. You're disturbing private property, setting up unauthorized equipment, and, frankly, you're making the good people of this town uncomfortable with your constant presence in areas where you don't belong." The judge's words stung more than Hannah expected. She had spent the last 15 years traveling to remote locations around the world, from the Arctic tundra to African deserts, always facing skepticism from locals who didn't understand her work. But this felt different. This felt personal. "Your Honor, if you would just look at my credentials," Hannah tried again, reaching into her jacket pocket to pull out her official National Geographic identification card, along with several government permits. Judge Lee waved his hand dismissively. "I don't need to see any papers. What I see is someone who thinks she can do whatever she wants just because she has some fancy magazine job. Maximum fine, $2,000. Pay the clerk before you leave, and I better not see you in my courtroom again." The courtroom fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock. Hannah felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment as several people in the gallery smirked at her public humiliation. She wanted to tell them about the strange signals her equipment had been detecting, about the systematic scanning patterns that suggested something was studying Earth from a distance, about the urgent need to understand what was coming. But she knew they wouldn't listen. Instead, she simply nodded and walked to the clerk's desk, pulling out her worn leather wallet to count out the fine money. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gave her an apologetic look as she processed the payment. "I'm sorry, honey," the clerk whispered. "Judge Lee's been having a rough month. His wife's been sick and he's taking it out on everyone." Hannah managed a weak smile. "It's okay, I understand." But as she walked back through the courthouse lobby, passing the same disapproving faces and whispered comments, Hannah felt a familiar determination building inside her chest. She had faced down charging elephants in Kenya, survived blizzards in Siberia, and navigated political tensions in war zones to get her research done. A small-town judge wasn't going to stop her from protecting humanity from whatever was coming. Stepping out into the evening air, Hannah looked up at the darkening sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. Venus hung low on the horizon, bright and steady, but her trained eye caught something else, a slight shimmer in the atmosphere, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. She reached into her equipment bag and pulled out a small metallic device, no bigger than a smartphone, but infinitely more sophisticated. The quantum scanner had taken her 3 years to build, using modified satellite technology and some creative interpretations of physics that most scientists wouldn't dare attempt. Placing the device carefully on the courthouse steps, Hana activated its systems with a few quick taps on its surface. The device hummed softly, almost like a contented cat as it began its deep space scanning protocol. Within minutes, it would be analyzing electromagnetic signatures from millions of miles away, searching for the artificial patterns that had been growing stronger each day. As Hana walked away from the courthouse toward her jeep, she didn't notice the device's screen suddenly flashing red with an urgent warning message that would change everything. The alarm screamed through Hana's makeshift laboratory at 3:47 a.m., jolting her awake from her desk where she had fallen asleep analyzing data. Red warning lights flashed across multiple computer screens, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the converted storage container she used as her field headquarters. Coffee spilled across her notebook as she rushed to the main monitoring station, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. The quantum scanner she had placed at the courthouse 3 days ago was sending impossible readings. Massive metallic signatures were moving through the outer solar system at incredible speeds, following precise formation patterns that no natural phenomenon could explain. The objects were roughly cylindrical, each one measuring over 2 miles in length, and they were decelerating in a coordinated fashion that suggested advanced propulsion technology. Hana's fingers flew across the keyboard as she cross-referenced the data with her global monitoring network. For the past 8 years, she had been secretly installing similar devices at remote locations around the world, always under the cover of her National Geographic assignments. What started as curiosity about unusual electromagnetic readings had evolved into humanity's first early warning system for extraterrestrial contact. The wasteland outside Millfield wasn't just empty desert as the locals believed. Her geological surveys had revealed massive deposits of lithium, rare earth metals, and something even more valuable, a naturally occurring isotope that didn't exist anywhere else on Earth. According to her calculations, this isotope could power spacecraft for centuries without refueling. Any advanced civilization exploring the galaxy would consider it worth fighting for. Her secondary monitors lit up with incoming data from scanners in Mongolia, Chile, and Antarctica. The alien fleet had split into 3 groups, each heading toward regions she had identified as containing strategic resources. They weren't just visiting Earth randomly. They had been studying the planet, mapping its resources, and planning this operation for months, possibly years. Hana grabbed her satellite phone and dialed the emergency contact number for NASA's Planetary Defense Office. After 4 rings, a sleepy voice answered. "This is Dr. Hana Kim, National Geographic Researcher, Authorization Code Delta 77 Alpha," she said quickly. "I need to report incoming extraterrestrial objects on approach vector to Earth." The voice on the other end sighed. "Ma'am, we get about 20 calls like this every week. If you're seeing something in the sky, it's probably just satellite debris or—" "Listen to me carefully," Hana interrupted, her voice sharp with urgency. "I have quantified electromagnetic signatures from 12 large objects, each approximately 3.2 kilometers in length, moving in coordinated formation at 0.07 light speed. They will enter Earth's atmosphere in approximately 18 hours. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to stop calling this number with false reports. Making fake emergency calls to government agencies is a federal crime." The line went dead. Hana stared at the phone in disbelief, then immediately dialed the Pentagon's general contact number. 20 minutes and 3 transfers later, she found herself speaking to a duty officer who seemed more interested in getting back to his crossword puzzle than listening to her warnings about alien invasion. "Let me get this straight," the officer said in a tone that suggested he was already planning to hang up. "You're calling from a desert in the middle of nowhere, claiming to have detected a fleet of alien spaceships that somehow every satellite and radar system on Earth has missed?" "My equipment is more sensitive than standard military radar," Hana explained desperately. "I've been tracking unusual signals for years, and this is exactly what I've been preparing for." "Right. Well, thanks for calling. But we'll handle any actual threats through proper channels." Another deadline. Hana tried the FBI, the CIA, and even the Canadian Space Agency, but each conversation followed the same pattern. Government officials, treated her like either a lunatic or a prankster, despite her credentials and the detailed technical data she offered to share. As dawn broke over the desert, Hana's equipment registered a new development that made her blood run cold. The alien fleet had changed course slightly, adjusting their trajectory to make direct approaches to 3 specific locations: the Atacama Desert in Chile, where she had detected unusual mineral deposits, a remote region of Siberia that contained rare metallic compounds, and the wasteland outside Millfield, where she now sat surrounded by humanity's most valuable resource. The ships were no longer just approaching Earth. They were targeting specific locations with surgical precision, demonstrating a level of intelligence, gathering that suggested they had been watching human civilization for far longer than anyone realized. Hana's hands shook as she activated her emergency broadcast system, sending encrypted data packets to every scientific institution and government agency she could reach. If the official channels wouldn't listen, maybe someone in the scientific community would take her seriously. The quantum scanner beeped with another update. Estimated time to atmospheric entry, 14 hours and 37 minutes. The alien fleet was coming, and humanity was completely unprepared for what was about to happen. All because a small-town judge had dismissed her as just another troublemaker, and government officials couldn't imagine that the truth might come from someone working alone in the desert. The first ship descended through the morning clouds like a massive teardrop made of liquid silver, its surface rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The vessel was easily the size of a football stadium, moving with impossible silence as it settled onto the empty field behind. The courthouse. 2 more ships followed, their landing creating small earthquakes that rattled windows throughout Millfield and sent car alarms screaming across the quiet town. Hana watched from her equipment station as the ship's surfaces began to shimmer and dissolve, revealing doorways that hadn't existed moments before. She had seen this technology in her intercepted communications, but witnessing it in person made her stomach clench with nervous excitement. The aliens used programmable matter, materials that could change shape and function based on mental commands from their operators. Emergency sirens wailed across town as Sheriff Park's patrol cars raced toward the landing site, but the officers stopped well short of the alien vessels, unsure of what to do when faced with something far beyond their training. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras broadcasting humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence to a shocked world. The beings that emerged from the lead ship stood nearly 8 feet tall, their blue-tinted skins seeming to glow with an inner light. They moved with fluid grace, their elongated limbs suggesting evolution on a world with different gravity than Earth. Each wore what appeared to be living armor that shifted colors like oil on water, and their large eyes held an intelligence that was both fascinating and terrifying. The leader stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire gathering without any visible communication device. His words formed perfectly in English, though his mouth moved in patterns that didn't match the sounds. "We are the Kata Empire. Your world contains resources required for our expansion. Your species will serve our greater purpose." Judge Lee, still wearing his pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat, stumbled forward from the crowd of townspeople who had gathered to witness the impossible scene. His face was pale with shock, but his years of courtroom experience helped him find his voice despite the circumstances. "Please, we can negotiate," he said, his words shaking. "We're a peaceful people. We can work together, find a solution that benefits everyone." The Carter leader's expression didn't change, but something like amusement flickered in his large, dark eyes. "There is no negotiation with primitives. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. Your civilization is barely capable of leaving your own planet. You have nothing to offer except labor and compliance." Behind the leader, dozens of other kata had emerged from the ships, some carrying devices that hummed with contained energy. They spread out in precise formations, their movements coordinated like a military unit that had performed similar operations countless times before. Several townspeople began backing away, finally understanding that they were witnessing not just first contact, but the beginning of an invasion. Hana pushed through the crowd, her field equipment bag slung over her shoulder and her quantum scanner beeping softly with new readings. She could see the fear in her neighbors' faces, the same dismissive attitudes that had frustrated her for weeks. now replaced with desperate hope that someone, anyone, might know what to do. "Actually, there is," Hana said clearly, her voice carrying. Across the silent gathering, the kata leader turned toward her, his attention focusing with predatory intensity. Before he could respond, Hana began speaking in a series of clicks, musical tones, and harmonic patterns that sounded like nothing any human should be able to produce. "Claratha nel kata, mordun ketha vashtai Hana Kim, veltar nostra ket malinar." The effect on the alien leader was immediate and dramatic. He stepped backward, his glowing skin shifting to darker blue patterns that Hana recognized as signs of surprise and confusion. The other kata behind him began chittering among themselves in rapid, excited tones. "You know our words?" the leader asked, this time speaking in his own language rather than English. Hana nodded, switching back to the kata tongue with growing confidence. "I know many things about your people, Commander Juno. I know about the crystal cities of Kata Prime, the 3 purple moons that sing in harmony, and the great storms that rage for centuries in your northern territories." Commander Juno's large eyes widened further, and he took another step back. The other kata had fallen completely silent, their attention focused entirely on this impossible human who spoke their ancient language with perfect pronunciation. "How do you know my name?" Commander Juno demanded, his voice now carrying undertones of what Hana recognized as genuine concern. "How do you know of our homeworld?" Judge Lee stared at Hana in complete bewilderment, as did everyone else in the crowd. The woman they had dismissed as a troublesome trespasser was casually conversing with beings from another star system, demonstrating knowledge that should have been impossible for any human to possess. "Because," Hana replied in English so everyone could understand, "humans have been listening to your long-range communications for 3 years. We've been studying your language, your culture, and your expansion patterns across the galaxy. We know exactly why you're here, and we know what you want." Commander Juno's armor shifted to deep red patterns, and Hana smiled grimly, recognizing the color change as a sign of growing respect mixed with wariness. Commander Juno's armor flickered through several color patterns before settling on a deep purple that Hana recognized as confusion mixed with growing anger. He stepped closer to her, his towering frame casting a shadow over the small human who had just shattered everything he believed about Earth's inhabitants. "Impossible," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "Our communications are encrypted with quantum algorithms that would take your primitive computers millions of years to decode. How do you know my name?" Hana reached into her equipment bag and pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a telescope. Its surface glowed with the same energy patterns as the kata ships, and several of the alien soldiers immediately raised their weapons, recognizing technology that shouldn't exist on Earth. "Your ships have been sending long-range scans for 6 months," Hana explained calmly, activating the device's holographic display. "Every time you probe our electromagnetic spectrum, you leave traces. I've been tracking your communications and learning your language since your first scout ship entered our solar system." The hologram showed a detailed map of local space with glowing lines marking the paths of kata vessels as they moved between star systems. Commander Juno stared at the display, his large eyes tracking the accurate positioning of ships that should have been invisible to human detection. "I also know about your homeworld Kata Prime and its 3 purple moons," Hana continued, manipulating the hologram to show a distant star system, Velkara, Mosthara, and Ixendi, the moons that sing together when their orbits align, creating the harmonic frequencies that your people use for deep meditation. Several kata soldiers behind Commander Juno began chittering nervously in their native language. Hana caught fragments of their conversation and realized they were questioning how a primitive human could know sacred details about their homeworld that even allied species weren't told. The alien commander stepped back, his skin shifting to colors that displayed his growing unease. Around the courthouse square, the gathered townspeople watched in stunned silence, as this woman they had ignored and dismissed casually demonstrated knowledge that challenged everything the aliens believed about human intelligence. "You are not The primitive species we expected, Commander Juno admitted, his voice carrying undertones of respect that hadn't been there before. Judge Lee found himself leaning forward, straining to understand every word of this impossible conversation. 3 days ago, he had dismissed Hana as a troublemaker, who didn't deserve his attention. Now he was watching her engage in diplomatic discussions with beings from another star system, displaying expertise that made his decades of legal experience seem insignificant. Humanity's strength isn't technology, Hana said, deactivating her device and meeting the commander's gaze directly. It's curiosity. While you spent months planning invasion strategies and resource extraction methods, we were studying you. Learning your language, understanding your culture, mapping your fleet movements. She gestured toward the quantum scanner that was still humming softly on the courthouse steps. That device has been analyzing your ship signatures and communication patterns since you first entered our detection range. Every time you thought you were observing us in secret, we were observing you right back. Commander Juno's armor shifted through several rapid color changes, a display that Hana recognized as intense mental calculation. He was reassessing everything his people believed about Earth's strategic value and the potential threat humanity might represent to cater expansion plans. Your species intercepts our communications, he said slowly. You decode our sacred languages. You know details about our homeworld that should be impossible for outsiders to learn. This suggests intelligence capabilities far beyond what our initial surveys indicated. The crowd of townspeople stirred uneasily as the implications of Hana's revelations began to sink in. Sheriff Park stepped forward, his hand resting nervously on his service weapon, despite knowing how useless it would be against alien technology. What does this mean for us? He asked quietly. Hana turned to address both the humans and the aliens. It means we're not the helpless primitives you expected to conquer. But it also means we understand enough about Kata culture to know there's another way to resolve this situation. She faced Commander Juno directly, speaking in the formal tones she had learned from intercepted diplomatic communications between Kata worlds. I challenge you to Kata trial of knowledge, as specified in your own codes of honor when encountering potentially intelligent species. The alien commander's eyes widened, and his skin patterns shifted to display what Hana recognized as surprise mixed with admiration. The trial of knowledge was an ancient kata tradition used to determine whether newly encountered species possessed true intelligence or merely animal cunning. You know of our sacred trials, Commander Juno said, his voice carrying new respect. But do you understand the stakes? In kata tradition, the trial determines the fate of entire civilizations. Hana nodded grimly. I understand perfectly. If I succeed in demonstrating human intelligence and wisdom, Earth gains recognition as an independent world, worthy of diplomatic relations. If I fail, if you lose, your world burns, Commander Juno finished, his armor shifting to the deep red patterns that indicated a binding commitment. All 7 billion of your people become property of the Kata Empire, and your planet becomes a resource extraction site. Judge Lee felt his knees go weak as the full weight of the situation crashed over him. The fate of human civilization was about to be decided by the woman he had fined for trespassing just 3 days earlier. Commander Juno raised his hand, and the air around the courthouse square began to shimmer with holographic projections. Star maps appeared in the sky above them, showing spiral galaxies, nebulae, and stellar formations that stretched across millions of light years. The townspeople gasped as they found themselves surrounded by a 3-dimensional display of the known universe. The trial begins, Commander Juno announced, his voice carrying the weight of ancient tradition. First question, identify the stellar nursery located in the Andromeda Galaxy's outer spiral arm, where new stars are born from cosmic dust. Hana studied the holographic display for only a moment before pointing to a bright region of swirling gases. The Kepler Nebula, approximately 2.7 million light-years from Earth. Your people established mining operations there 400 years ago to harvest rare crystalline formations that only form in areas of active star birth. The alien commander's skin patterns shifted to show surprise. He hadn't expected her to know about Kata mining operations in distant galaxies. Several of his officers chittered nervously behind him, as they realized this human possessed intelligence, far beyond their initial assessments. Second question, Commander Juno continued, expanding the holographic display to show complex biological structures. Describe the primary life form found on Xerion 7, the fourth planet your species would encounter if you attempted interstellar travel. Without hesitation, Hannah pointed to a section of the display. Silicon-based crystalline entities that communicate through harmonic resonance. They're photosynthetic, but also feed on metallic compounds in their planet's crust. Your surveys classified them as potentially hostile because they view carbon-based life forms as contamination threats. Judge Lee watched in amazement as this woman he had dismissed as a troublemaker demonstrated knowledge that seemed impossible for any human to possess. Around the square, news reporters frantically scribbled notes while their cameras captured humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering topics from quantum mechanics to interstellar politics. Commander Juno asked about gravitational anomalies in distant star systems, the migration patterns of space-dwelling creatures that fed on cosmic radiation, and the complex alliance structures between various alien empires scattered across the galaxy. For every question, Hannah provided detailed answers that revealed not just knowledge, but understanding of the deeper implications. When asked about the war between the Zephyrian Collective and the Mechanoid Union, she correctly identified the resource disputes that had sparked the conflict and predicted how the war would likely end based on each side's industrial capabilities. The alien commander's frustration grew with each correct answer. His skin patterns shifted rapidly between colors that indicated confusion, admiration, and growing concern about what humanity might represent as a potential threat to Carter expansion plans. Finally, Commander Juno decided to ask a question that should have been impossible for any human to answer. Describe the mineral composition of Keter Prime's asteroid belt, including the rare elements that power our spacecraft propulsion systems. Hannah smiled confidently and began speaking with the precision of a professional geologist. The asteroid belt contains standard rocky debris, but also significant deposits of quantum crystallized lithium and a unique isotope you call velterium. This isotope doesn't occur naturally in most star systems, which is why your people prize it so highly. It allows for faster-than-light travel without the energy requirements of conventional warp drives. She paused, then added something that made Commander Juno step backward in shock. Your asteroid belt also contains the remains of an ancient space station, built by a civilization that existed before your people evolved. You've kept this discovery secret because the technology inside could revolutionize interstellar travel for any species advanced enough to understand it. Several Carter soldiers raised their weapons, clearly agitated by this revelation of their most closely guarded secret. Commander Juno quickly gestured for them to lower their arms, but his own alarm was obvious in the rapid color changes flowing across his skin. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying harmonics of amazement mixed with respect. "How is this possible? Our security protocols should have prevented any species from learning such classified information." Harnett gestured toward the quantum scanner on the courthouse steps, which had been quietly recording everything throughout the trial. "Because humans don't just explore our own world. We reach for the stars, even when others call us crazy for looking. At Empty Wasteland, while you were studying us, we were studying the entire galaxy." She activated her holographic device again, this time showing a network of monitoring stations scattered across Earth's surface. "We've been intercepting communications from dozens of alien civilizations for over a decade. We know about your wars, your trade routes, your technological capabilities, and your expansion plans. We know which species are friendly and which are threats." Commander Juno conferred with his officers in rapid, clicking conversations that grew increasingly animated. The other Kata soldiers formed defensive positions around their commander, clearly uncertain whether they were facing a diplomatic situation or a potential military threat. After several minutes of intense discussion, Commander Juno turned back to face Hannah and the gathered crowd of humans. His armor had shifted to golden patterns that Hannah recognized as indicating formal respect and acknowledgement of equals. "The Carter Empire recognizes Earth as a protected research world," he he announced, his words carrying across the square with ceremonial weight. "Dr. Hana Kim, you will serve as official liaison between our peoples. Your species has demonstrated intelligence, wisdom, and capabilities that qualify you for inclusion in the Galactic Council." As the alien ships began lifting off, their engines creating rainbow-colored auroras in the morning sky, Judge Lee approached Hana with an apology ready on his lips, but she was already walking back to her equipment, checking readings and preparing data uploads to her global network of monitoring stations. "Dr. Kim," he called after her, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about everything." Hana turned back briefly, giving him a tired but understanding smile. "You weren't wrong, Judge Lee. You were just thinking like a human from a small town. But now we're all citizens of the galaxy." The woman who had been dismissed as a trespasser had just saved the world, and as she returned to her work, everyone knew that humanity's real journey was just beginning. The end.